If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it is the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Hello and welcome to Reproductive Rebel. I am your hostess, Adrienne Irizarry. As an Eastern medicine practitioner that uses holistic approaches to women's care, I tackle the elephant in the room, our collective frustration with the allopathic healthcare system. In this podcast, I give you a new way to look at your body, understand what it is telling you, and care for your reproductive health. Welcome to this journey. I'm so glad you're here. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are. I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Hello and welcome to the Reproductive Rebel podcast. Our guest on today's episode is Lindsay Sara of Flow with Your Flow. Lindsay is a womb healing guide and certified fertility awareness method educator. With her master's in social work, she is here with you to connect to your womb, feeling free in your body and trusting your intuition. Welcome to the show, Lindsay. I am so glad to have you here. This is a topic that I talk to my clients about a lot, and I've been looking forward to having a professional on this show to be able to talk to about it. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Lindsay, tell us a little bit about what it means to use the fertility awareness method and what it means to be a fertility awareness educator.
Yeah, so the fertility awareness method, I really describe it as a way of learning the language of your menstrual cycle. Your menstrual cycle has so much to share with you, including cues about your health, as well as when you're fertile and when you're not. And when you learn how to understand that language, you can then understand, how the health of your menstrual cycle is doing, as well as avoid pregnancy naturally and optimally timed conception. So it really has those three uses. So I view it as a tool that can actually guide you throughout your entire cycling years of your life. So basically what it entails is tracking your menstrual cycle. I usually use 3 specific markers. I'm sure we'll go into further down the road, like the different types of fertility awareness. But what I use is basal body temperature. So your body temperature first thing when you wake up in the morning, your cervical mucus, which is mucus from your cervix. I mean, a lot of people say discharge, but there's many different types of discharge. So this is specifically from your cervix. We observe it just by wiping, like when you go to the bathroom, and LH testing, which is a urine test that tests for a hormone that lets you know ovulation is on its way. So it's not just tracking like, how am I feeling today? What are my symptoms? When am I getting my period? It's tracking these 3 specific aspects of your cycle. LH, cervical mucus, and basal body temperature to help you understand your health and fertility signs. And being a fertility awareness method educator, I help people understand their menstrual cycles. I help you understand how to read and learn the cues of your body so that you can confidently know how the health of your menstrual cycle is doing, how to avoid pregnancy naturally so that you don't have to be on the pill or the IUD or the implant, and also optimally time conception if and when you are ready for that.
Awesome. See, this is exactly why I wanted to have you on here, because I have lots of conversations with clients about, what is the best type of birth control for me? Does the birth control pill, help me regulate my cycle? And that's like a whole conversation for an entirely different episode. But I have always really loved being able to help guide people with the beautiful roadmap that their body lays out for them. But sadly, so many of us have not been taught how that roadmap works, what it looks like, because if we were given that information from the very beginning, I talked about it in the very first episode, whether we haven't been given this information because, they don't want us to have the rules of the road, or if it's a little more insidious and it takes our power away, like there's a whole bunch of reasons that we could not be given this information right from the beginning. But I find that the women I work with, and I'm sure it's the same for you too in your practice, that when they're given that information, it's like the clouds part and the sun comes out, and it's like, oh, that's why I feel this way.
Yes, that's like the perfect way to describe it. The clouds part and the sun comes out. It's so much clarity. It just brings so much clarity.
It really does, in terms of how we move through our month. And, the last 2 episodes of this podcast, we covered, what healthy menstruation is and why I'm so passionate about people knowing what their body is telling them. Because you touched on menstrual imbalances, and, I can see future episodes going in that direction. But, there's so much about that our cycle tells us about our internal health, how we can support ourselves. And, learning to be able to read that roadmap is really, really important. So I have a list of questions that I wanted to ask you. It's a culmination of questions that I get quite often in my practice, and I know that you do as well. And I thought that if we went through those questions, it would be a really meaningful way to let people know what you're all about, what fertility awareness is all about, and what they have for options in terms of being able to monitor and track their cycle. So you had touched on in your intro that there were different ways of tracking a cycle. Can you elaborate on what those are?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways of using fertility awareness. So the terms that you might see are symptothermal, symptohormonal, and hormonal only. So basically, when we're looking at the different methods, each method tracks a different biomarker or sign of your cycle. Okay. And some track more than one. So with the symptothermal method, we have that thermal in there, right? So we're tracking temperature and cervical mucus. With the symptohormonal method, we have that hormonal word in there. So we're tracking the hormone LH. We're testing for LH, which lets you know that ovulation is likely going to occur in 24 to 36 hours. And you're tracking cervical mucus. So with both of those methods, you are tracking cervical mucus, but then the second biomarker differs. And with the hormonal method, to be honest, I don't know too much about the solely hormonal method, but there are methods where you are just testing for hormones throughout your cycle. Personally, I teach a combo of the symptothermal and symptohormonal method. So I use all three because why not? Like the more you can track, the more clarity you're going to have. So I teach temperature, cervical mucus, and LH testing. and use the three of those together to really help you be able to pinpoint ovulation, because it's all about pinpointing ovulation the best that you can. Because once you know when you're ovulating and what your fertile signs are, you can really gather so much info about your health, but also understand like, when am I fertile and when can sex actually result in a pregnancy, and when am I actually not fertile? Like, when is the egg no longer here and when am I not fertile? Right. So that's really what fertility awareness is all about.
Well, and that's so important, because I've had women who've been trying for years to get pregnant come in the door, and because they hadn't been taught what those fertile markers look like, they had been completely missing their fertile window. And it took just a couple of lifestyle changes and a change in their attempt schedule, we'll just call it that, and they were able to get pregnant without any issue. And and they had like years of heartbreak, and they had gone the Western route and looked for, well, what's wrong with me, because that is a narrative that we carry with us as women, because obviously we have to be the problem, which is not true, and I will cover that in another episode. But we internalize that narrative very much. And because of our fertility markers are a sign of our femaleness or our femininity, it really takes a toll on the identity when, conception doesn't happen in an expeditious way. So
Right.
I did want to ask you about the rhythm method. And that's something that, a lot of people are familiar with the terminology, but they're not familiar exactly with how it works. How does that fit into that hormonal and temperature structure you were outlining?
So a lot of people I find confuse the rhythm method with fertility awareness, and they'll be like, well, the rhythm method isn't that effective, so fertility awareness then wouldn't be effective, right? But they're actually two different things. So with the rhythm method, you're basically looking at past cycles and you're seeing like, when did I bleed in a past cycle? So then when did I think I approximately ovulated in the past cycle, right? And then we're going to use that to predict future cycles. But our cycles are dynamic and changing. So we can't use what happened in the past to predict what's going to happen in the future, because your ovaries are going to do what they want to do, right? It's not like they're like, oh, I ovulated at this time past cycle, so I'm just going to keep doing that. There's so many things that impact our cycles and that impact when we're ovulating. So that's why it's really important to not use past cycle data to predict when you're going to be fertile in the future, because it is going to be inaccurate a lot of the times. So whereas fertility awareness is about observing day by day, we're not looking at the past. We're looking at what's your body telling you today. What does your cervical mucus look like today, right? What's your temperature today? And then we use those signs.
And that's really important too, because like you said, your stress level, for example, varies from one month to another. Just that in and of itself can delay ovulation and change your parameters quite a bit. Sometimes it can actually affect your cervical mucus, and you may not even ovulate if you've been really sick or something of that nature. So, thank you for outlining that. That was an excellent explanation, because I find that people really do interchange the two in terms of their vocabulary quite often.
Totally.
So one of the things that I have noticed stands in the way of people starting to adopt fertility awareness as a means of birth control is the fear of an unplanned pregnancy. So how effective is fertility awareness as a means of birth control?
Yeah. So this is something that comes up so much around my clients as well. Like, I have so many clients who have come off birth control, but have been so like, it took a while because there was so much fear around avoiding pregnancy. And then some people who are like, I really, really want to, but I still just can't do it because I am afraid I just can't get pregnant right now. So The thing with fertility awareness is that it's actually really effective. So, if you're using the symptothermal method, there's a study on the symptothermal method by Petra Frank Herman, which shows that the symptothermal method is 99.4% effective with typical use, 99.6% effective with perfect use. I mean, 99.4% effective, that's extremely high. That is with typical use, that's higher than the typical use rates of the pill and condoms. So this is extremely effective. The only things that you might see is like if you're searching and you're like Googling, like, okay, I'm looking up the fertility awareness method, what's the effectiveness rate? A lot of the times you're going to see different fertility awareness methods grouped together, including the rhythm method. That'll often just be thrown in there. And so if you're looking at fertility awareness methods as a whole, and there's an average taken, the less effective ones are going to draw down the more effective ones. So when you're looking at effectiveness rates, you want to look at the specific method that you're thinking of using. Like, is it symptothermal? Is it the rhythm method? Which I don't recommend. Is it is it the symptohormonal method, right? Like, what are you actually using? And then what is the effectiveness rate of that?
Yeah. And I think that's really important too, because culturally, we have been taught to be afraid of getting pregnant. Right. And it's part of that cultural subtext. And like, even when people really want to start that journey towards motherhood, sometimes there's still that like emotional, deep-seated hurdle that you have to jump over going, oh, I'm actually going to allow myself to get pregnant now. Not to mention this wild understanding that we have that you can get pregnant anytime.
I know. Oh my God. I was just going to say that. Like, that you get pregnant anytime, right? As soon as you get your period, like you can get pregnant anytime. No, you can't. Because there's only actually 6 days of your cycle where if you had penis and vagina, unprotected sex, that it would actually result or could actually result in a pregnancy. 6 days, right? And now when you're tracking, you might have more fertile days than that. If you have cervical mucus that's more fertile, that lasts a bit longer. But the 6 days comes from the fact that sperm can live in fertile cervical mucus for up to 5 days. And then when you ovulate, the egg can live for 12 to 24 hours. So that's where we get that 6 days from. Anything outside of those 6 days, there's not a possibility of sex ending up in pregnancy.
Well, right? And even during that window, it's like not 100% chance.
No, it's not. It's not.
It's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like 33%.
Yeah, I thought it was around 30.
Yeah. Okay. So, hey, we're going to say this part again, because this is the part that tends to melt the minds of my clients is one, you cannot get pregnant all month. Okay. You can't, you just physically can't. Okay. 2, you only have a 33% chance of success if all of the parameters are optimal. And we're talking about healthy cervical mucus. We are talking about appropriate timing. We are talking about a partner that has optimal sperm count, because that is a huge problem right now.
Yeah,
and
it is.
We can talk about that in a little bit, but if everything is optimal, you only have a 33% chance when you try. Mm-hmm. So if you know the roadmap that your body is giving you, and you are taking care to watch as your body shifts through your hormone cycle throughout the course of the month, you know exactly when those 6 days are and when you can have penetrative sex with absolutely no worry whatsoever. And it is a huge mental hurdle for most of us because we are taught to think that we can get pregnant anytime. And it's really, really easy to do. Now, granted, there are certain periods of our life we have, the right types of cervical mucus and crypts and all these things. We have the right body structure in order to increase our chances, because we have the right crypts, we have the right cervical mucus, we have more of that fertile cervical mucus. But then, even later on in our life, we still have that roadmap all through our bleeding years. Now, from an Eastern medicine perspective, I mean, women were successfully having babies up until they went through menopause.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it's possible, folks, but like, you've got to know your body and you have to know how to take care of it in a really meaningful way.
Right.
So anyway, I had to drive that part home because, and I know that you get this in your practice too, but I find that one of the biggest hurdles to coming off of birth control is that fear that we have been taught to have about getting pregnant. And then when we go to get pregnant, we realize, wow, it's not quite as easy and quite as fast as I expected it to be.
Right.
And we're not mentally prepared for that either.
Right.
It's crazy. So anyway, this is why I wanted to drive that home, because it's an important one.
And this actually reminds me too of like, I just want to mention that fertility awareness is not just about like, so let's say you're trying to conceive, right? It's taking longer than you expect. Fertility awareness isn't just about timing sex in the right part of your cycle. It's about knowing your cycle health too, because when you get an idea of your cycle health and your hormone levels, because your cervical mucus is going to tell you all about your hormone levels. So once you get an idea of that, you can actually understand, like, is this an optimal time for me to try to conceive? Or do I need to explore a bit more about what's happening with my hormones before trying, so that I have a better chance of, if conception actually occurs, do I have a better chance that the egg will actually implant, right? And that I won't have a miscarriage. And you need optimal hormone levels in order to sustain a pregnancy.
Absolutely. And so from an Eastern perspective, I'm going to take that same vocabulary.
Yeah.
And we're looking at you having enough yin in your body for there to be enough cervical mucus. You tend to have very scanty, scarce, or none at all cervical mucus when there isn't enough yin in the body. And that does affect how the rest of your hormones play out through the rest of the month. A lot of times you'll also see those signs show up, or you do see those signs also show up in the menstrual cycle, when we're talking about the menstrual cycle health as well. So if you decide that fertility awareness and emancipating yourself off of synthetic hormones feels like something that you might want to tackle, okay. What kinds of things do you need to keep track of in order to track your cycle effectively?
Yeah. So just to go a little deeper than I did before, you need to track at least in the way I teach, right? Remember, there's different methods, but the way that I teach, you track your basal body temperature. So that's taking your temperature first thing when you wake up in the morning, or wearing something like a temp drop, which is an armband that goes around your arm. It takes your temperature while you're sleeping. So for some people, that's a bit easier if you don't wake up at the same time every day, or like awake throughout the night or things like that. I use a temp drop. I love it. So your body temperature is going to tell you whether or not you're before or after ovulation. So before ovulation, the temperature is lower. After ovulation, the temperature rises and stays higher until it drops back at the end and you bleed. So temperature is a really amazing map. Cervical mucus is the most important biomarker that you're going to be tracking. And that's going to tell you your fertility status and what's happening with your hormones day by day. Okay. So it's going to let you know when you're approaching ovulation, when you're likely super close to ovulation, And then it will also tell you when you've likely passed ovulation, but we also need temperature to help us really confirm that with more certainty. And then LH testing. LH is a hormone called luteinizing hormone. It's released from the brain 24 to 36 hours prior to ovulation. It triggers ovulation to occur. So this hormone LH surges prior to ovulation. And what we're testing for with urine test strips is this LH surge, so that you know likely in 24 to 36 hours that you'll ovulate. The reason I say likely is because what if you get sick? What if you get super stressed? What if something crazy happens? Then you might not ovulate. So that's why I say likely. I don't recommend ever using LH testing alone, but when you use it with cervical mucus or with basal body temperature or both, then it just helps you have a better idea at pinpointing ovulation. It brings in more clarity. And it's also a really good marker to use if you're trying to conceive and time sex around ovulation.
Now, one thing I did want to ask is I get asked about checking cervical position quite often.
Yeah.
Is that part of what you use with your clients? Can you talk, because I've had some people go, I don't know about sticking my fingers in there. I'm not really comfortable with that. Or
Totally.
I can't reach it.
Yeah.
So can you still have really accurate results if you're only using basal temperature, cervical mucus, for example?
Totally. Yes. So cervical position it's just an optional biomarker. It's optional. I usually recommend cervical position if cervical mucus is really confusing, or if basal body temperature is really confusing. Like if something else is confusing and isn't giving you the clarity that you're desiring, then cervical position can be something that you can add in for a little bit more clarity, but it's not necessary. I personally have charted for 3.5 years, almost 4, crazy years, and I don't use cervical position. It's just never felt like something that I really wanted to do. And most of my clients also don't use cervical position. In my course, I do have a module that teaches you how to check cervical position if you want to add that in, but it's not necessary at all in order to get accurate results if you're using the other biomarkers.
Awesome. Yeah. That's something that I get asked fairly frequently, because it's the same pushback that I get about a menstrual cup. Do I really have to stick my fingers in there? Because there's some people that are really, they have a strong aversion to the idea. So,
right.
It's nice.
Even with that, with cervical mucus too, a lot of people think I don't want to check my cervical mucus because I don't want to put my finger in my vagina all day long either, right? But that's not what it is. So you're wiping, right? So you're just wiping and you're observing what is on the toilet paper. What did it feel like when I wiped? You're looking at sensation too. What did it feel like? And what do I see? Can I pick it up? If I can I stretch it? We're not inserting your finger into your vagina all day long to check cervical mucus, because it can just honestly bring more confusion into it, as well as bacteria, unless your hands are clean all day long, so just with the wiping method, that's going to minimize exposure to bacteria and also just give you a clear and consistent way to do it.
And now for a quick break and a word from our sponsor.
I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I learned nearly enough about the physical and energetic demands of my adult female body when I was younger. Not Your Mama's Menstrual Course is an online self-study course to get exactly that. the information that most of us didn't get when our periods first started. In this course, I discuss the energetic changes and physical requirements of each phase of your cycle. Working in harmony with your cycle will help lessen your PMS symptoms and help you to properly support each phase of your cycle. Your month is comprised of so much more than just menstruation. There is a beautiful dance of hormones and energies that comprise our entire monthly cycle. Interested in learning more information? Get your copy of Not Your Mama's Menstrual course today. Now, back to the show. Excellent. That actually made me think of something else that I talk about with my postpartum clients. So fertility awareness tracking can actually take place when you're in the postpartum period, because you can start ovulating long before you start having a bleed. Totally. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like 62 days or so after.
So the thing is, like, it's not necessarily that you start ovulating well before you have a bleed, because like a luteal phase, which is the time from after bleeding until menstruation, can range from like, on average 9 to 17 days. So once you ovulate, you are going to bleed pretty soon afterwards, and it's probably going to be within 2 weeks. But what you will see way before bleeding is fertile cervical mucus making an appearance. So you will see fertile cervical mucus coming in patches. Like you're going to see it and then it might leave for a little, and then you see it come again and then it might leave. And that's your body trying to decide like where to put its resources. Like, do I want to ovulate right now, or do I want to focus on healing when I'm postpartum and possibly, producing milk for this new little human, right? So it's your body really trying to decide where to put its resources. And the recommendation for charting postpartum is, if you are not solely breastfeeding or chest feeding, meaning no bottles, no pumping, no anything, just skin to skin. If you're doing anything besides skin to skin, you need to start charting 2 weeks postpartum. 2 weeks.
Wow. That's even earlier than I tell my clients. Yikes. Yeah. I find that most of my clients don't really feel like they want to be intimate physically with their partner before 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how their birth went. But that's excellent information. See, I learned things today too. This is exactly why I wanted you on this show. So 2 weeks, and you start with the same toilet paper check that you do when you're.
And honestly, I recommend learning how, if you know that you want to chart, I would even recommend learning how to chart before pregnancy, because learning how to chart postpartum, it's doable. Especially if you're working with an instructor, right? That would be like the most important thing. You're not just winging it. It's doable, but it's one of the most challenging times to learn, because you're not going to have like a consistent cycle pattern. There's going to be mucus and then none, and mucus and then none. And so, it helps to learn prior to pregnancy, and then just after you get, you know how to use it, you get in the swing of it, you just restart tracking the same way right after pregnancy, or 2 weeks if you want to wait those 2 weeks.
Now, does your basal temperature fluctuate quite a bit with nursing and things like that postpartum? And are you only looking at cervical mucus?
You can also check basal body temperature. You might see some fluctuations, but you're not going to see that like pattern of shifting, because when you're looking for ovulation, you're looking for like a shift up, and then it stays up for quite some days before it drops again. So you're probably going to see a lot of temps that kind of like go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, Yeah. Yeah.
But no drastic highs and lows.
To be honest, it could happen even when you are not in postpartum. You can have some drastic highs and lows.
It's true.
So, yeah.
I'll see, and I'll
Yeah.
look at temperature with some of my clients to get an idea of deficiency patterns, because you can see like sawtooth patterns and things like that that will give a good indication of what the underlying deficiency is and how I can
Interesting.
support a body,
Awesome.
and in which phase it needs more support in. So that's how I use charting more than anything with my clients, is as another piece of data to be able to guide our thinking in terms of like, if symptoms are a little gray on one side or the other in terms of, well, it could be this or this. A lot of times the basal body temperature will tell the rest of the tale, so that I know where to focus effort, which is kind of interesting.
Cool. Yeah. That's why I always tell, like, if I'm working with clients, I'm like, I can teach you how to chart so that you know really confidently, like, how to chart. I can teach you how to understand what's happening with your hormones. But then if you want help implementing things for like help with your health, then you go to someone like you, right? Or like an acupuncturist or, a naturopath or someone like that who can also read charts preferably.
Yeah. And it's really important too, because there's a lot of valuable data in there. So this actually dovetails really nicely with, one client asked, well, do I need to track my cycle if I'm not trying to get pregnant?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have plenty of people who come to me who are like, well, I'm not trying to get pregnant right now, or, I'm not avoiding pregnancy right now. I'm just chilling, pretty much. Like, I'm just chilling. Or maybe it's that they have a partner with a womb and there's no any risk of pregnancy or anything happening. Right. So the thing about charting is that it's a tool to guide you through all the parts of your reproductive years, including the in-between parts, or even, if there's no chance of pregnancy or you're not trying to conceive, anything like that, because it can give you really amazing information about your health. So the reason that I started charting was because I wanted to understand my hormone health, because I had really painful periods and my doctors really had nothing much to say about that. So
they often don't, not to bag on the Western model, but they often don't. They often are like, here is a pill, or we could do surgery. And those are generally the two tools that they have to offer. So knowing your body intimately is really important.
Yeah. Like, I used Fertility Awareness, not even as birth control, just to track my cycle and know my body for health reasons for at least a year before I started using it as birth control. And like, it was awesome. I mean, this is an awesome tool. It tells you so much about your body. It helps you really connect to yourself and become an incredible, informed, and empowered advocate for yourself and for your cycle health and fertility. This is a tool that I feel like it's just, I view it as like the foundation for healing my womb. Like, this is my anchor into understanding my cycle health.
I love that. That is such a beautiful way to look at it. And it's true. Like, I remember when I started learning about fertility awareness and how to use it as a tracking method, I got really angry. And my husband was like, are you going to rage at the computer the entire time you're learning about all of this? And I said, yes, I am, because this is information that I should have had about my body years ago.
Right.
I had endometriosis, painful periods, irregular periods. Like, my period ran my life, and I had to plan around it. I had pads stuck everywhere you could possibly imagine, because I never knew when that thing was going to sneak up on me. And it was just, never came in gently. It was always a flood when it started. So if you were caught unawares, whew. And so I first started tracking, and I remember that's exactly why at the beginning I used the clouds parted and the sun came out analogy, because that's how it felt for me.
Yeah.
I felt like, oh, I know when my period's coming because my temp would drop, and within 12
Exactly.
hours, it's like I knew what the magic number was.
Yeah.
97.2, man. I knew 12 hours later, my period was coming. And it was so helpful because
I
at that
know.
point,
Oh my
sometimes
gosh.
it started on day 18, sometimes it started on day 25, sometimes it started on day 32. And it was
Mhm.
just a guessing game from like
Yeah.
about day 15 on, which straw I drew that month, and
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it catapulted me into the work that I'm doing now. And I remember thinking like, oh man, if I had known this years ago. And then I was mad at the system that I didn't know this years ago. So I
Right.
love
I
this,
know. Me
the
too.
way that you're capturing this. I love the work that you're doing because so many women could benefit from this and not feel like their cycle is running their life, like they're
Right.
in control of their life.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that actually takes me to the next question that one of our people asked us, which is, if you have an irregular cycle, can you still use fertility awareness method?
Yes, because we're not using the rhythm method. We're not.
Exactly. We're not looking at past data, because if you had looked at
Yeah.
mine, it would have been a train wreck the entire way through. We would have never known when I was ovulating.
Yep. We're not looking at past cycle data to predict the future. We're just looking at, is your body telling you that you're fertile today? Right. And so from that, it doesn't matter if your cycle's irregular or the most regular ever. Like, it doesn't matter because you're just looking at day to day.
I love it. See, all these good reasons, ladies, that we may want to consider using this.
Totally.
So one other piece that I hear from clients a lot is, I have white discharge all month long, so I can't tell when I'm fertile. From my perspective as a clinician, I see it as a sign of dampness. So that means that there's an imbalance somewhere in their body that I need to support them with.
Yeah.
But does it make fertility awareness hard to track?
Yeah. So I also agree with you that that could be an imbalance in the body. That's when, so in a situation like this, I always would encourage someone to get extra support health wise, right? But you can still track with temperature, with LH testing, with cervical position too. So even using all of those biomarkers, you can still get a pretty good idea of if and when you're ovulating. And the other thing is, like, I would also ask the question of, are you on birth control? Because if you are on birth control, like, I mean, not the copper IUD, but like anything hormonal, if you're on anything hormonal, it's going to thicken your cervical mucus and make it so that it stays the same all the time, besides bleeding, of course. But it's going to make it so it stays the same all the time. You're not going to observe changes in your cervical mucus. It's going to be somewhat, thick or creamy or pasty all month long. And so, if you're on birth control, then I would say, well, I don't have a risk of pregnancy anyways. I mean, there's nothing is 100% effective, but it's not, you have protection there, but that could be what's actually causing your cervical mucus to look like that.
Yeah, because it's disrupting your hormones.
Right.
Hormonal birth control disrupts your hormone cycle throughout the course of the month. It can affect your mood. It affects your cervical mucus. It changes your energetic flow through the month because it is a medication designed to interrupt a healthy hormone cycle in a body.
Right.
And that disruption shows up in places just like this.
Exactly.
I see clients that even when they're not on birth control, sometimes they can have white discharge pretty commonly throughout the course of the month. And a lot of times I'll see that when they have too much dampness in their body, it'll show up in their tongue and things like that. And so, yeah, so I do encourage them to use basal temperature tracking and things like that to be able to, and when they're coming off of birth control, I think that's the other time that I tend to see, and I'm not sure if it's your experience as well, but I tend to see lots of white discharge that kind of muddies the reading a little bit for people who are new to tracking. Which is another reason why I encourage them to take their basal temperature, because that transition off of hormonal birth control, the longer you're on it, the longer you tend to have this weaning of symptom effect coming off of it, but that can change your results as well.
Totally. Yeah. That's interesting, because what I've seen usually with people coming off birth control is dryness. Like no cervical mucus.
Yep. And that can happen from stagnation. So the pill is really stagnating. Well, not just the pill, any form of hormonal birth control, but I work with people most commonly that are coming off of a form of the pill or NuvaRing. And I can either see, depending on their body constitution, I'll see the white or I'll see dry. And it has to do with stagnation, actually, in both cases. One creates more of a swampy situation and there's too much dampness. And in the other, there's not enough yin. And so they're too dry.
Totally.
So can somebody learn to do this on their own, or should they work with a certified educator like yourself?
Yeah. So I recommend I view self-teaching, learning it on your own, as a really good place to begin. So I began fertility awareness teaching myself. Like I was reading books and, I was getting really into it, but I realized that, I learned a lot. It was awesome. I learned a lot. It was so exciting. Like I was learning so much about my body, but then it got to a point where I was like, hitting a plateau. And I was like, I'm not quite reaching the level of confidence and the level of clarity that I really am desiring. Right. So, and I wasn't comfortable at all using it as birth control when I was just teaching myself. So I got to a place where I was like, you know what? I'm going to work with an instructor. Like it's time, I feel like if you get to that place where you are hitting a plateau and you're realizing like, I want to go deeper, that's your cue. That's your cue to work with an instructor. Or, you don't even have to begin with it self-teaching. If you know that you're serious about this, that you want to learn it right from the get-go with guidance and confidence and clarity, then like you can start working with an instructor right away. So, I mean, it's like, it depends on, what are you using it for? Do you want to use it as birth control right away? Are you just trying to get to know yourself a bit better? And how serious about it are you? How serious are you with avoiding pregnancy? Like, is that a very big priority for you? How serious are you about truly understanding your health symptoms? Right. And so it can be really helpful to work with an instructor to get to that level of clarity and confidence that you're really going to want in order to have this really be a sustainable practice. There are plenty of people who I work with who started teaching themselves, who come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I realized that this whole time I was checking cervical mucus wrong. Or
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that. Or like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize it was like this. Or, I was only checking internally once a day when like you're supposed to be checking cervical mucus all day every time you wipe, right? So they could be missing stuff. I've had people who have tried to teach themselves and then ended up with an unplanned pregnancy. I've had, and these are the things that go around of like, don't use fertility awareness. Like, it's not reliable. Well, did you work with an instructor? Were you trying to teach yourself? That's usually the question that I have right off the bat. But like, there's plenty of times when people come to me and be like, oh, you know what? Like, I realized I wasn't fully understanding my basal body temperature, or there's like things that were missing. Like, you can have some of the pieces in place when you are teaching yourself, but then when you work with an instructor, that's when you're going to be able to fill in the missing gaps and really make sure that everything is like clear and cohesive.
I love that. Yeah, I feel that if you can get a solid start with a practitioner, whether it's fertility awareness or any other modality, there's a lot of DIY information out there. But there's nothing like working with somebody who has put the time and education into specializing in a particular area to be able to give you the launch pad and the confidence to be able to do this accurately, because
Exactly.
it's so effective when you know what
Right.
you're looking for.
Yeah. And that 99.4% effectiveness rate with typical use from that study that I mentioned before, that was a study of based on people who worked with an instructor. That wasn't a study of people who were self-teaching. So we don't have statistics of effectiveness rates of people who are self-teaching. I would imagine it's much lower though than that great, 99.4 rate. So
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And that actually leads me to another question. And we were talking about the logistics earlier when you're using this as a viable means of birth control. One of my favorite questions is about tech. And you had mentioned the temp drop earlier. And I get asked about tech a lot. Is Daisy better than temp drop? And what about the natural cycles? They now have a thermometer that hooks into their tech. And there's a whole bunch of them out there on the market.
There's so many.
So let's talk a little bit about thermometers and what you would recommend in terms of success for anybody who might be interested in just starting to check out what this temperature thing is all about. And I do want to make sure to also catch the piece about does your app tell you when you're fertile? I think we can put both of those things together.
Me too. So, okay. I'm going to start with what I don't recommend. So I don't recommend using Daisy or natural cycles, because with those methods, that's like a good, like fancy rhythm method, basically, because it's using past cycle data to predict your fertility in the future. And as we talked about, that's often going to be inaccurate. I'm not an expert on this. I'm trying to think of the article that I read about it, but I think it was Daisy. Don't count me to this though. Don't hold me to this. That had to like change their marketing around to not saying it was for avoiding pregnancy. So yeah, with Daisy and natural cycles, we're using past cycle data to predict what's going to happen in the future. And basically with that, you're going to get some inaccurate predictions. So what I recommend is if you're going to use an app, you can chart on paper if you want. Like, I have some really great paper charts I provide my clients with. But if you want to use an app, the only app that I recommend is Read Your Body. And Read Your Body is an app that is extremely customizable and doesn't make any future predictions of anything. Okay. So it's basically like you inputting your own data day to day and understanding your own fertile signs. Like, You have so much power in knowing your body. You know your body so much better than an app does. So we don't want any apps that are going to make predictions for you and say like, on these days, green days, you're good to go, or red days, you can't, or whatever. Like, we don't want anything like that. We want to actually understand our body enough to be able to make our own decisions day by day of like, am I fertile today or am I not, without an app telling us for us. So I recommend Read Your Body as the app, but you need to know how to use fertility awareness in order to use that app, or it's going to be a bit confusing. The other thing I recommend is, as far as thermometers go, you can use a glass thermometer, you can use a digital thermometer, or you can use a temp drop, which is a wearable thermometer. They all have their pros and cons. And, in order to really recommend one, I'd have to understand your sleep patterns and, when you're waking up and all of that. But if you want a reliable thermometer that's going to be good to go no matter what your sleep patterns are, then I recommend Temp Drop, because with Temp Drop, you wear it on your arm, you wear it while you're sleeping, and it uses an algorithm, and it's taking your temperature throughout the night and then giving you your temperature once you wake up in the morning and sync it to your phone. It has its own app, the Temp Drop app. I don't really recommend that app because for charting. I recommend it. You have to use it in order to pull your temperatures in, but I don't recommend it for all of your charting because it just doesn't have as many customization features really. So with Read Your Body, it has a Temp Drop integration where you can actually go in and you like log in with your Temp Drop information, and then every day you go in and chart. I almost just want to like pull it up on my phone. So basically you go in and you just literally click like pull from Temp Drop every day, and it'll just pull your temperatures in. The thing about Temp Drop too is that the past 2 to 3 temperatures are always subject to change due to its algorithm. So when you have it synced to Read Your Body and you're pulling in the temperatures, it's going to automatically update the latest 2 to 3 temperatures. Whereas if you're charting on paper with Temp Drop, you have to constantly update those temperatures yourself. So you're going to want to chart in pencil if that's the case. But as far as like apps and thermometers go, like Temp Drop is an investment, but it's a good one. So I love Temp Drop. Before I used Temp Drop, I just used like a digital BBT thermometer. I really like the Easy at Home one. I don't know. I used it for a while. I really liked it. But Temp Drop has really taken a lot of stress off of like getting the perfect temperature. So I love Temp Drop and Read Your Body.
Awesome. I didn't know. See, I am a new Temp Drop user. I just started using it because I wanted to be able to talk to my clients about it. And I've read some really great things about it. And I like the fact that it takes some of the inconsistency out of that first thing in the morning. One, because of wake time, but two, like if you put your thermometer on your nightstand and it's cold in your room and you need to warm it up before you stick it in your mouth in order to get a consistent temperature, but you have to pee really bad.
Right.
Like that was the worst. And I was like,
yeah,
it was enough to turn me off from doing it. So when I learned about Temp Drop, and I actually learned about Temp Drop through your feed, and we'll talk about how people can find you.
Sure.
That I was like, oh, I've got to try that because it takes a lot of that inconsistency out, and I like it so far, but I don't like the limitations of the app itself because you're spot on. Like it doesn't record all of the things that you want to record. So I'm going to have to integrate that. You're going to have to send me that information, and I'll put the app information into the show notes so that anybody who may use Temp Drop can do that integration, because I think that's great.
Totally. And I also have an affiliate link for Temp Drop where you can get 10% off.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely give me all of that information and I'll make sure
Sounds
to
good.
include it in the show notes.
Okay.
So, final words for our audience about using fertility awareness, the power of using that in terms of their overall health, and any gems that you would like to send people off with.
Gems. I mean, I would say this is a life-changing practice. Like, I can't even imagine not having it anymore now that I have it. Like, now that I use it, I'm like, nobody takes it away from me. Like, this is my practice. I love it. I'm learning so much about my body. It's guiding me throughout my entire reproductive years. It's just absolutely incredible. Like, it's going to be your anchor back into your womb every day, because you're going to be connecting to your body every day. And there's so much power in that as well. And like, the other thing is, if you're interested in learning fertility awareness, why wait? That's my other like gem of information is like, just start it, just do it now, because it's going to give you so much information about your health. And like, you're going to be, it's not like you get to have a menstrual cycle forever. So like, the earlier you start it, the longer you get to use it, right? The more you get to get out of it, the longer you get to use it. So those would be my little gems of info.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for your time and your expertise.
No problem.
This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart for so many reasons, and you are a wealth of knowledge. So if people are looking to connect with you and maybe check out that course that you were talking about that has cervical position and a wealth of other information in it, how can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Flow with Your Flow, also on TikTok now too. I just started a TikTok. So you can find me in both places. My website is flowwithyourflow.com. I recommend, if you want to reach out to me, the best place to reach out to me is on Instagram. So send me a DM. I'd love to just chat with you. If you listened and you tuned into this podcast and you want to reflect with me or ask any questions or just connect, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. And the course that I have is called Fearless Fertility Awareness. It is, because fear often holds us back. So
it really does. I love that.
Thanks. So it's called Fearless Fertility Awareness, and it is a self-paced course that you can, like, it's not like, there's a group and it only meets like 6 times or something. It's a self-paced course. It is so jam-packed and with juicy information of all the biomarkers. It teaches you how to chart your cycle for hormone health, like understanding your hormone health, for avoiding pregnancy naturally, as well as optimally timing conception, making sure your hormones are in a good place for conception. And the thing about this course too is that it includes 1 month of free access to my Embodied Fertility membership, where you can get all your questions answered about fertility awareness. I used to teach fertility awareness in a group format, and I still might do that here and there, but I noticed that it's an ongoing practice, right? So it's like, what happens when the 6 weeks end or the 12 weeks end? Like, you're continuing on using fertility awareness, but you don't have that consistent support anymore. So that's why I switched it to this way of offering it, where you can do it at your own pace, but you can still get my support with the Embodied Fertility membership. Like, you get your first month free as being a part of the course, then you can stay as long as you want so that you can continue to get ongoing support. It's like having an instructor in your back pocket. You can ask me questions anytime, and we also have 1 live call a month. So that would be the best ways to work with me regarding fertility awareness.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us today. I hope you guys go and check out that course, and there will be information about that and how to reach Lindsay in the show notes. So be sure to check those out. And thank you again for joining us for the Reproductive Rebel podcast.
Moon Essence is excited to bring you a new resource, the Moon Essence app. Moon Essence is a one-of-a-kind resource providing women a holistic way to support their reproductive health and wellness. Feel in the driver's seat of your own health with evidence-based interventions proven to decrease symptoms experienced with your cycle each month, increase your fertility, and ease life transitions for women in every phase of life. Empowering women's bodies with education about their health journey is the heart of our work. Head over to the Apple App Store or Google Play and download this free educational resource today. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider making a contribution to the Reproductive Rebel podcast. Your support in any amount helps us continue to inspire current and future generations. Show your love for this content in the listeners' support section below. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist, herbalist, sound healer, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment with Adrienne for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like us and follow Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.